Hello, this is an assessment for restoration of a board grand piano made in 1924 and 160 centimetres long. Now, just looking at the music stand here, it's quite plain for a board. The rest of the piano, as we'll see in a minute, is very decorative, so I'm not sure if that's an original music desk. If you're watching this and you're in the trade, perhaps you can help. But it's well veneered and very attractive anyway. So there's the name board. Board in the UK, you don't find that many grands. Lots of uprights made much earlier than this. So this is quite a find, really. Now the ivory keys are in pretty perfect condition and just need buffing, really. I don't think any of them have come off and been stuck back on. Now, the casework has this very attractive fan type of veneer. Just have a quick look at that. Obviously it needs repolishing, and it's going to be quite spectacular when it's repolished. Once we sand this down and apply polish, it'll be a different colour, and we'll see some of the original colour in a second. And by the way, this is a fold up middle section. You get this on some grand pianos. You can see the beautiful veneer under there too, and the way they've done that in the kind of fan shape as well. And the more you look at the piano, the more tasteful it is, really. A lot of French pianos are quite attractive, and we'll see in a minute that this piano is also a high quality piano. So looking round, there's a lot of thought gone into the veneering of this piano, and on the sides too. If we go down here, beautiful fan on this right hand side and on the other side too. Quite faded polish, and as we see on this bit here, you can see there's a darker colour, and if we lift the lid we'll see underneath. Before we do that, looking around the left hand side of the piano, the long side, also we've got this fan veneer right the way around. If you've seen this before and have repolished one of these, it'd really be wonderful to hear from you as to any comments you've had. Well, there's the underside of the lid. If we repolish it, we probably would try and bring out more contrasting grain here, although in the video it looks quite contrasting. There's a potential for it to be even more so. Sorry, that wasn't quite in focus, but very tasteful veneer indeed. This is a redder colour as well. I'm not so sure that we go for exactly that colour, but normally we just do a natural polish according to the colour of the piano, so I think it might be a little bit lighter in colour. A major issue with this piano is loose tuning pins, and indeed they are loose. So let's have a listen to the tone as well. Underneath that looseness there's a very rich sound, and on the break point here, very even sound, incredibly out of tune, and it's about well, at least 10 beats flat. But right through you can hear a nice full tone, right through to the very top. The hammers have been replaced, as we'll see in a minute, and a very, very good job's been done on them as well. Now I have tried resetting the pins, that's holding this and then tapping the top, just to tap the pin in a bit, roughen the wood up and see if it's tight. And they do tighten up. Just trying to find out whether we need to replace the Wrestplank or not. Putting bigger pins in will certainly make them tight. But there's a question about the Wrestplank, which we'll see in a minute anyway. So the Wrestplank has got cracks on the top. Now they might just be superficial cracks, so again it may not be necessary to replace the Wrestplank. Now the Soundboard has a crack going across it here. That shows it's dried out, so I'll be been drying out on this piano. As we mentioned many times before, it's a cosmetic thing to have this crack on here, because the sound travels and the other gets carried across the Soundboard by the ribs. So looking underneath the Soundboard, you can see the cracks here, but you see the ribs going the other direction. That's where the sound is transporting the sound across the piano. This could cause buzzing, the crack. Obviously, if we're going to restring the piano, we'll also restore the Soundboard at the same time. Someone's put a Hydroceel unit in here. And if you're listening to this and are a fan of Hydroceel, the problem is that people tend to forget them. That needs putting in the bath every, say, month or so to fill it up. So they can be effective, but they do tend to get forgotten. That's the problem. Now while we're under here, the pedal mechanism is working well. There's no noise at all on it. You can see there's a bit of wear here. there's a bit of dip there, so obviously we're going to recondition the pedal as well when we restore the piano. There's not much evidence of wear on this right hand pedal, in fact much less than I expected considering the hammers have been replaced on the piano. I'd expect to see more wear on the pedals, so I don't know if these were replaced as well. There's not really much legroom here, so as the pedals are very low, we've mentioned on other videos, they're as low as Bechstein pedals, which are usually some of my favoured pianos really low. You could put 1-inch castor cups under there. Those are screws from the Action, by the way. So you could do that, and this wouldn't be too high. 1 inch higher, they'll still be quite playable. So if you have got a problem, the piano's a bit, the legroom's not enough, then certainly that could be increased. Now, board have put on these extra copper wound with the 3 strings. That is a sign of a manufacturer that's trying to make a really good piano. So obviously this is a small grand, so the bass isn't fantastic, but if you listen to, for a small piano, that's a very, very good bass, and these are nicely coned as well. So an attempt to make a really good piano, a really good small piano. In the 20s and 30s there were lots of small pianos made because there were already lots of larger ones around in the Europe, so there wasn't such a need for larger ones. So that's the era of the small piano. Just to look at these are individual strings, which is supposed to make the more stable tuning. A lot of manufacturers, they go round, so you'd have this string going round the pin and back up again, so if you broke a string you could use the same one rather than have to replace it. But this is a sign of someone to make, again, wanting to make a really good piano. Now I'm just going to take the Action out of this piano, and before you do, you have to check that all the hammers are down. That one is, as you can see, if that's left like that, when you pull the Action out, the hammer will break off. And I'm mentioning this because, as you'll see in a minute, I've made that mistake myself. So we can just push that down with in this case with that screw, and it'll needs to be down, and then we can pull the Action out without a problem. Now, the first time I took this Action out, I was very conscious of that, but the Action is very, very tight, and the first thing I do is to make it easier to get in and out, much nicer to work on then, and maybe weaken the springs. I think certainly lubricate the bed of, we use furniture polished lubricant, seems to be the best one for that. And if you're in the trade and have got a better idea, please let us know. But I put the Action back in, pulled it out again, and let's see what happened. So as the Action was so hard to get out, I was concentrating on that and did the cardinal sin, as it were, and broke the hammers off. This is this one here, and that's broken off in such a way that we'll have to chamfer this in order to get it to fit properly. It won't. We can't just stick it back on because it's too clean. We'll have to make an angle, as it were, and put that back on. It's something we obviously can do. And would you believe it, I actually broke the top one off as well. That's broken off in a different way, and it's going to be easier to repair. So there's the top hammer. We all make mistakes, but to make that mistake twice, I can't believe it. Perhaps it was a senior moment. Now, as I mentioned, these hammers have been replaced, and they're good hammers, and they're nice and soft down here. They get harder as you go up, which you've mentioned before in videos, and they need a bit of voicing, obviously. But if we look at this one, it checks nicely, and as I release the check by lifting my finger a bit on the key, it's bouncing up nicely, maybe a bit too harshly, but that's excellent. There's hardly anywhere on the back check either. So the Action pretty much gets a clean bill of health. We'd often replace this, and possibly, you might think if you're a technician watching the video, you'd replace that roller, but it does feel really good actually. Perhaps slightly notchy. We can certainly lubricate it with some French chalk, and that would be a good idea. There's plenty of graphite on there. Just to see what we're going to do, we probably lubricate the central rail here. The touch is not too bad on the piano actually. It's pretty much, I haven't measured it, but it's pretty much as it should be. Now I'm questioning the Wrestplank, which is the main issue on the piano. As you can see here, that's been scraping against the Wrestplank. So there's something going wrong there. So there's the underside of the Wrestplank, and you can see the scrape marks very clear. I'm pretty sure that this Wrestplank's not the original, and if you're a wood person, perhaps you can tell me what that wood is, because I'd guess, probably wrongly, I suppose beech or maple, but if you are a wood person, please let me know. My colleague obviously would be able to do that in our restoration team, but they're very bad scrape marks, so obviously it's going in and out. That's one of the reasons, my excuses for breaking the hammers. It was hard to get the action out. Obviously that will make the action come out easier when that could sand this off, but I'm wondering about replacing this Wrestplank, though it has been replaced, so maybe just replacing the tuning pins would be enough. So that's a decision to make. Obviously it costs more to replace the Wrestplank, and especially on a small piano it might be difficult to get it out. Looking at the dampers here, you can see some oxidization in the leads. Now we would very often replace leads when they're oxidized like that. You can scrape this oxidization off and then lacquer over it to stop it happening anymore, but often it's cracked the wood as well. The team will have a look at that. You can see, if we look along, you'll see lots of oxidization all the way along generally, so right to the other end. And whether it's cracked the wood or not, we'll have to have a look. It could well have done, in which case they would automatically get replaced, I think, these days. By the way, there's no evidence of moth in the piano. I've got two felts on. We don't like putting two felts one on top of the other normally, because it makes it a bit squashy, but we'll have to see. Maybe that does actually work well. So just going back to the Wrestplank again, you can see that it's flush here and then it goes down, so it's actually thicker. I can't think that would be the original. Don't know if it needs to be that thick, because you can't see the tuning pins touching it at all. So let's say that's been replaced. But if you are in the trade and like to comment, please do. Just to finish off with, well, the down weight, that's actually 56 grams, which surprises me. But I think it's not going down partly because the hammers, I didn't mention that the hammer hinges are tight, so they need lubricating too. And then we may need to re-weight the keys, but I would be surprised if we also lubricate with dry lubricant the centre rail, then probably that will go down. But it's not going down with 56 grams. And well, a bit of encouragement it is, so they're a bit uneven, so we're obviously going to try and weight them, and when this is finished, there's no reason why it shouldn't feel as accurate as a new piano. So that's an assessment for restoration of a board 160 gram piano made in 1924, and a very high quality instrument. Very impressed by it. What impresses me, the underlying tone here, but obviously it definitely it's got a problem with the tuning pins being too loose. And I think from what we've seen, we do need to replace the Wrestplank, unfortunately, so it's quite an expensive job. But well worth doing. The piano's a high quality piano, and the casework, as I've shown at the beginning, is really special, so it's going to be a delight to work on this piano. Trying to decide what really needs doing. The hammers are very good, apart from the couple that I broke earlier. They're in very, very good condition, and we can easily obviously repair those. Sorry, it's a bit of a pain to listen to this, but the underlying tone, right down to the bass, is very lush and beautiful. So it's going to turn out an excellent instrument. The keyboard needs weighting a bit, so we'll set that to be slightly lighter than average, I think, about 48 grams. Just to make it a nice piano to play if you're not studying seriously. It's nice to have a slightly lighter action. Thank you very much for listening. The work's now been completed on the piano, and so let's have a look at the case first. So that's been totally repolished, French polish. Takes about 70 hours, 30 coats of French polish applied thinly, and then it's waxed at the end, so that there's not too much shine, and you can see the grain. It's a lovely rosewood grain here. So rosewood always does look with a great contrast. You can tell rosewood, there's the black lines and then the very light. It's huge contrast in rosewood. That's why it's so popular with pianos. So this is a board from 1924, so it's a bit later than most of the rosewood pianos are, but I'm really glad they chose rosewood, because it has meant that the repolishing has been a delight to do, really. The polish has been applied without any added colour, so it's literally natural, polish. It's the natural colour of the piano. It's very changed from the faded look that it had before. This I shall put a jump link to where you can see exactly the same parts of the piano, so you can compare what it used to look like. But this is the contrast is staggering, really, and we're so grateful to be given the task of doing this piano, because it's going to go over it quite slowly, just so you can drink in the appearance of it. It's been a delight for the polisher to do it, and for us to see as well. French pianos, I think we've had one other very, very decorative piano like this, which was French by Gaveau, and that's a bit more common. Board is not such a common make, certainly of that age, 1924. There are older board pianos. In the UK, you do find quite a lot of board pianos round about the turn of the 19th century. That is at around 1900, 1895, that kind of date. We'll just have a look at the serial numbers of board in a minute, but let's go right through the whole case first, enjoying it really, because it's obviously been tremendous work of art making this piano in the first place. And so French pianos can be quite decorative, and the Gaveau, which is more common in the UK, that's a beautiful piano too, but I've never seen anything like this, and I haven't seen any board grands in the UK at all, mostly small uprights really. The legs are very tasteful as well, and there's the lyre, very low pedals, which is useful because I think I mentioned in the first half there's not a huge amount of legroom here, so you could raise them up with half-inch thick casters or even inch thick, and you still wouldn't have the pedals too high. So if you were tall, that would be a possibility. And just want to show you one more feature, and that is that this has folding, middle section folding separately here. There are some grands made in the 20s like this, and it seemed to be quite popular to do that. I'm not quite certain why it was done. Obviously you can then pull out the music stand like that, and this one has a different fold. I'll show you the back of that in a second, but my feeling is one of the reasons they did that is so that you don't get a point here, because if you have this bit, normally that's attached to the, it goes back in one piece. So then you've got a point there, and not very nice to encounter that point when you're walking around. So it's quite useful to have that folding down, I think. But it's not that commonly done, and obviously makes the appearance different on the top lid. There's the back of this music stand, and it folds down like this, which is certainly something I haven't seen before. Or maybe I have, but don't remember. I suppose one thing about this is you can't really adjust the angle of it if you want to, but they've chosen a very good angle, so that makes up for that. Now, inside the acoustic side of the piano, as we call it, has been fully restored, and tried to make the frame colour as authentic as possible. But it's redone. New tuning block. We have changed the tuning block, and that was the most important thing that needed doing really to put right. New dampers here, and the strings we mentioned, they're individually strung. So that's, I won't go on too long because the first part of the video was very long. We just wanted to show you the finished product on the inside here. So we mentioned they've taken a lot of care and thought about this piano, so it's meant to be a very high quality piano, which it is. So if we look at the string length there, we made them the copper a little bit longer, and prefer to have less of a gap here than it had originally. So that's one thing that maybe we've improved slightly. And we'll listen to the tone of it in a minute. If we look at the piano atlas here, we see that Board did produce, it says here, as many as 4,000 pianos annually. That was their height. I think we're going to find that's around about 1899. There's 3,000 difference there, isn't there? 2,000 there. So really 2,000 pianos will be what they produced during that period of time. And then later on here in the 1924, which is this one's dating, that's producing, it looks like, less than 500 pianos, because they go up in 500 increments, so less than 500 pianos a year. Whereas in the turn of the century, where we find a lot of small overdamper boards in the UK, they've got problems with tuning pins very often being loose, but they're very sweet sounding pianos. That's the ones that we find round about this period, and I've never come across board ground in the UK, 1924, 1920, that sort of age. If you're familiar with them, we'd love to learn some more about them. Now, before the restoration, you saw that a major problem was that this Wrestplank here was actually catching, or the action was catching the Wrestplank. You see there's a good gap, as there is in most pianos, well, all pianos have got a good gap, and small pianos have less of a gap, but there should be at least that kind of gap, and the Wrestplank won't sag down. This is a delignate Wrestplank. You can always tell delignate Wrestplank because they rather difference of colour in them, and you can see the laminates here as well. Actually, you can see that there's some definite laminates. Delignates is a very laminated Wrestplank, as we mentioned many times before. Schwander action, which is very common in Europe, and the felts have been replaced here. Sorry, not these felts here, but the felts in the keys, and also the felts under the keys. The felts under the keys have been replaced with just one beige, one felt here, and instead of two. We said that was a bit squashy, and then obviously levelled up with cardboard washers underneath, and paper washers too. Now the hammers have been refaced they produce a very sweet sound, as we'll hear in a minute, and the one that was broken here has been repaired. You can't really notice the repair, it's a slightly different colour of the glue there, and the one at the top too has been repaired. And I did talk about the rollers. They have actually been replaced, and also we've got talc on them, or French chalk, or Teflon powder. You can use any of those, as we've said many times before, and it does feel a lot smoother. That's the smoothness of the action's quite dependent on the roller, and obviously that's raised the hammer up a little bit too, so it's well regulated, the right hammer blow, and the springs are working beautifully. As I release the back check by lifting my finger a bit off the key, it should go upwards, which it does, and really positively, so that it doesn't actually hit the string twice, and doesn't feel strong in the fingers, but is enough to last for a long time basically, so as positive as you can get it. And now let's listen to the tone of it and compare it with the Bechstein. This is not a real fair comparison in a way, because the Bechstein's a lot longer, it's 6 foot long. And the treble it only has 85 keys, this, so I couldn't go up to the top C. So obviously the board is a shorter piano, but for a 160 centimetres piano, that's a very, very good bass. And very clear right down to the bottom, and of course the bottom notes you tend to play in the octave anyway. So that's a board 160 centimetres grand piano made in 1924. And after the work's been completed on it, and we're really grateful to have the opportunity to work on this piano. Not only is it wonderful casework, but it's actually a very high quality instrument. One thing I should have mentioned before is that because it's been repolished, it's important to vary how you have the piano, because if this is kept up like this will gradually fade over the years, and that will be dark, so you need to vary it. And with the top lid exactly the same, and sometimes open, sometimes closed, the music stand sometimes up and down. Vary as much as you can, and then it will fade evenly. Very, very common for us to buy pianos and find that there's on the top lid a different colour underneath the first section. So that's just something important to know if you've got a repolished piano, so that it maintains its value, well obviously maintains its appearance. I didn't mention the touch, but now the touch is set at 50 grams, which is exactly as it should be. It was a bit heavy before. Of course, it was very out of tune before. Now it'll hold its tuning beautifully. The tuning pins are very tight, like a new piano really. If you're interested in finding a piano like this and for us restoring it, we certainly love to do that. The problem is there aren't many of them in the UK. There's some by the make Gavo French pianos, and they're also very attractive, and they come up from time to time. Board would probably have to source it in France for you, but if you're interested in having one, and I can well understand that, it's such a beautiful instrument, and it does play beautifully as well. It's very fluid to play as well. And very sweet sounding. And certainly a piano I'd love to play all day long and just find out the beauty of its tone. If you're a pianist and really studying seriously, then there's no reason why you shouldn't have a fully restored piano instead of a new one. It can be got to have just as delicate a touch as a new piano. So I hope that's helpful. If you've got any inquiries, please write to info@robertspianos.com. Thank you very much for listening.